There were some headlines by a couple of different sources that are very upset that 83 ethics complaint violations that have been filed against Justice Brett Kavanaugh have been now dismissed. And the reasoning behind this is because these ethics complaints were filed on him as a DC Circuit judge. And the thing is, now that he is a Supreme Court justice, he is no longer a DC Circuit judge, which means that he can't be disciplined by their disciplinary body, I guess is the way to bring it up. So that's what's going on right now. He really doesn't sit under their jurisdiction anymore, and because of that, they really have no power to discipline him. And so that's the reason that these things are going to be dismissed. Now, there's going to be some people, I understand, that don't like Brett Kavanaugh, and the way that the story is crafted and the way that people are going to be spinning this is they're going to be looking at this headline and say, see, something corrupt is going on. Something evil is going on. Brett Kavanaugh is getting a pass on all these ethics violations. Well, there's a couple reasons why that's not true. First of all, these aren't ethics violations. They are accusations of a violation taking place. The second thing that you need to know about this is they're not saying that they are illegitimate or not legit or legitimate either way. They're just saying that, well, now that he's no longer a judge on the circuit court, we can't really do a whole lot about it. There's really not anything that can be done because he's no longer here, and we can't discipline him as a member of this court if he's not here to be disciplined, which is exactly right. For example, if you were a Alabama state senator, we'll just use our state for an example, and you run a race and get elected to the United States Senate, well, the Alabama Ethics Commission really can't do anything to you at that point. Now, if you broke a law, that's different entirely. If you broke an ethics law, then we've got a problem. Because if that takes place, then you can get the FBI involved, you could get a number of different law enforcement agencies involved to look into a allegation of some kind of illegal activity. But that's not what's happening here. These are people that are filing a complaint specifically with the governing body that oversees disciplinary action in the DC Circuit Court. And basically they're saying, well, there's nobody that works here by the name of Brett Kavanaugh anymore. He's not here anymore. He doesn't work here. And so there's not a whole lot we can do about it. I mean, this would sort of be like if you were to switch jobs and the manager of your old job got a complaint and he calls you to let you know, hey, we've got a complaint against you and we're going to dock your pay. Well, you can't dock my pay. I don't work for that company anymore. That's not how this works. And so there's nothing nefarious going on here. And from a legal perspective, this is exactly right. Whether or not you like Brett Kavanaugh or not, whether you agree with it or not, and I'd be saying the same thing if this were a liberal judge. If Merrick Garland had wound up coming through and there were ethics complaints against him at his lower job, I don't remember what circuit he was with, but he was with an appeals court, if I'm not mistaken. If there had been ethics complaints filed against him, then as a Supreme Court justice, he is no longer a part of that particular district court. And so if he's not part of that circuit, I'm sorry, there's really nothing you can do to him at that point unless he actually violated a law. Now, if any of these people that are filing these ethics complaints against Kavanaugh are saying that he actually did violate a law, then they need to report that to the proper authorities. In other words, they need to get in touch with the FBI. If it's a local ordinance or a city or state ordinance that he violated, they need to get in touch with wherever that jurisdiction would take place. But this is the point that you're running into, and this is one of the issues with the Me Too movement, is there is this sort of cavalier attitude when it comes to making things actually go through a legal process. And we saw this play out very, very publicly with Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation, is that there was this attitude that you should ignore the legal process and just believe the people that are claiming that something illicit happened. That's not the way this works. If Brett Kavanaugh actually broke a law, then he needs to be held accountable for that. But what you've got is a bunch of people that are issuing these ethics complaints that aren't actually violations of the law. And so once he's moved on from the court, there's no longer any way to discipline him in that way. And unless he broke a law, then there's nothing you can do with that ethics complaint to go to the Supreme Court, because you can't have the disciplinary body over a district court all of a sudden disciplining a completely different court like the Supreme Court. And so this is the issue that you're running into. There's no corruption. There's no shady backroom deals or quid pro quo or anything like that. All this is that he moved on to a different job, and you can't discipline somebody that no longer works there because that's the disciplinary body's job. So that being said, let's be honest about why these 83 complaints were taking place, because presumably, or at least to my knowledge, the vast majority of these, in fact, possibly even all of them, were issued after he was tapped by President Donald Trump to be the nominee. Because if I'm recalling correctly, and again, you guys double check me on this, I couldn't find this report in my research, so maybe I'm getting this wrong. I don't believe that any of these ethics complaints actually took place before Brett Kavanaugh was nominated. There may be one from back in his days in the federal court, but it's safe to say that the vast majority of them, at the very least, started pouring in after he was nominated. And according to the BuzzFeed article that I was drawing this from, according to them, in Tuesday's order, the Judicial Council of the 10th Circuit said that it had, quote, greatly liberalized the standards for accepting complaints, even accepting postcards, as long as they identified who had filed the claim. So basically, these 83 claims took in, and these 83 ethics complaints that they're talking about, anybody that wanted to complain about it, they pretty much got through. Literally a postcard citing an ethics complaint, as long as there was a name attached to it, they said, yep, that's one. So anything that came in on Brett Kavanaugh complaining about a possible ethics violation, evidently they just went ahead and took. And so this is probably a greatly, greatly inflated number. And they're saying for this particular case, specifically for what happened to Kavanaugh, they started basically accepting any complaint that came in, regardless of how formal it was. If somebody was presumably just standing next to the water cooler and said, oh yeah, I have a problem with Brett Kavanaugh and he broke ethics and this is why. Yep, write that one down. That's one more. I mean, it was just ridiculous. They greatly lowered the threshold of what constituted an ethics complaint to be able to pursue these. And that's what makes it so incredibly ridiculous. There needs to be a far more stringent process for accepting what is an ethics complaint. And by the way, even though this is unconnected to the current story that we're talking about, Christine Ford, who is is she actually a professor? I know she's a doctor of psychology. The person that was accusing Brett Kavanaugh of attacking her, the one that testified before Congress, just so you know, she is now doing public speaking engagements and making public appearances for pay. And this is something that I said that was a stupid argument when the whole Kavanaugh circus, and there's no other way to describe it, the circus that was his confirmation hearing process was going on. One thing that just irked me to no end is that people were constantly saying, well, why would she lie about it? She has nothing to gain from it. Are you kidding me? Nothing to gain from it? I mean, you look at what happened to Anita Hill. Anita Hill is still a famous person and is still doing speeches and has done book deals and gets called up on different news networks from time to time. The idea that there was nothing to gain by Ford coming forward is just stupid. Now, again, I can't definitively say that that didn't happen because you can't prove a negative. I can't definitively say that Kavanaugh didn't grope her when that happened. I don't know. But there was nothing to back up that claim whatsoever. And she basically couldn't even prove that she actually knew Kavanaugh back then. And yet, now she's going to be getting book deals. She's going to be making these public appearances for pay, I might add. And wonder how many flights she's going to be on going back and forth. And you'll remember that was a big thing. She said she couldn't testify before Congress because she was afraid of flying. And that became a big thing, even though we found out that she'd actually been flying back and forth all over the place. She was like the Beatles at this point. When we found out that she actually had been doing quite a bit of flying just for recreational purposes. And so That being said, looking into this, there's the idea that she just had nothing to gain and she was just doing it because it was the right thing to do and she had this moral conviction and there was no reason for her to have done this other than she was just concerned and she didn't want somebody who had attacked her on the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, there's nothing to that. That was a dumb argument then, and what we're seeing play out now proves how stupid an argument that was. That she is now going around and making the rounds, and now she's a celebrity, especially in leftist circles. In fact, I mean, if you just wanted to make a quick buck, all you would have to do is invent a story about a Supreme Court justice and come before Congress and testify and be the hero of one side or the other. Presumably, that's the way to do it now. And so that is one part of this whole narrative that really just made no sense. But really, the Christine Blasey Ford thing, they're trying to bring up these ethics complaints, and they're going to use that probably as a battle cry. And one of the reasons that they're going to do this is because they've already talked about it. They talked about it before the man was even confirmed. They're talking about impeaching Kavanaugh. The truth is, if you want, let's get real here. If you want some honest opinion on it, the truth is they're probably better off just leaving him alone. And I'm not just saying that because I want Kavanaugh to sit on the court. It may be in my best interest for Kavanaugh to get impeached. I'm not saying that I want him impeached. He would have to do something to merit that at this point. But what I'm saying here is, if you're looking at what we're seeing of him so far, Kavanaugh does not look like the staunch conservative activist that a bunch of people on the left tried to make him out to be during the confirmation hearings. And I said that was a load of crap when they were saying that. They were so terrified that he was going to overthrow Roe v. Wade. And believe me, I want them to overthrow Roe v. Wade, which is the reason that I thought Kavanaugh was not a good pick. There was no reason to believe that he was going to be sufficiently pro-life when it came to this issue. And so the truth is, if Democrats politically were smart, they would leave Kavanaugh alone at this point. Because they've got somebody who, especially based on this recent ruling where he actually sided with may be a little bit too strong, but he opted not to take an abortion case that would have dealt a serious blow to the funding of Planned Parenthood, at least in states that wanted to opt out of granting Planned Parenthood money. He decided to not involve himself in that, he and Justice Roberts both. And it really, in my opinion, doesn't make any sense if you're somebody on the left to look at that and say, oh, we got to get Kavanaugh out right now. We've got to do something to get Kavanaugh out of office. Why? I mean, right now, all signs are pointing towards Kavanaugh is your best bet. If you want Roe v. Wade to not be overturned, if you want to keep abortion legal, and you want to have somebody that's not a staunch originalist when it comes to the Constitution, like Justice Thomas, like, based on what we've seen so far, Neil Gorsuch, your best bet is to leave Kavanaugh alone and let him basically be Kennedy light. Or maybe even Kennedy, regular. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. We don't have a lot of ideas about his opinions at this point. But everything looking, the way that things are looking right now, I don't want Kavanaugh out. Because if Kavanaugh comes out, Trump is going to nominate somebody else, and there is a much better chance that you're going to get an actual conservative, a constitutionalist. So from my perspective, it might actually be better if Kavanaugh got impeached. I'm not saying I want that to happen, but it might be better. But if you're on the left, leaving him alone is probably the smartest thing to do. And unfortunately, this is really indicative of the whole thing that was the Kavanaugh hearing. The left, what they've done with Kavanaugh is they've dumped a bunch of bogus claims in their lap, not giving you enough time to sort them out and say, see, all these complaints against him and the Republicans, they're not listening to it, which means there's this great injustice that has happened. You don't go chasing every single ambulance. If somebody comes forward with a credible claim of an actual crime and wants to bring that forth and to bring that as a reason that Kavanaugh ought to be looked at, maybe be impeached, I'm fine with listening to that. I'm fine. I change my mind. My mind can be changed. I'm open to it. But you can't just fling a whole bunch of literal postcards in this particular situation and say, well, I don't like Kavanaugh because of this, because he violated this, and not even accuse him of a crime and say, and that's a reason he needs to be impeached. There's nothing nefarious going on here. This is much ado about nothing. Hey, if you want all the latest updates to this channel, you need to go ahead and like this video and subscribe using that little notification bell down there. Now, that gets you all the latest updates, political commentary, and any of my Bible classes or studies that I post to this channel. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't subscribe that it's because you hate America and hate Jesus, but I can't think of any other reason why you wouldn't subscribe.